All right, they can see you, I think. All right. Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask a question down below this video, and I pick from those each week. There were a lot of comments below this video and a lot of questions, a lot of good questions, so continue to ask them. I appreciate everybody's participation. Had a lot of participation this last week because I had announced a giveaway for the ProPlugger, and I'm giving away one from the YouTube comments from last week and one over on Instagram. I have those winners picked. I'll announce those a little later in the video. I have shot several new videos for the new channel, Garden Plants with Jim Putnam, if you want to go over there and subscribe to that channel. And I'm in the process of editing them, so there are new videos going up on that channel this week. So let's get to some questions from this past week. A pretty good list of them here. I talked about Rossette in last week's video, and a lot of people made comments down below about how they've seen it everywhere in their neighborhood, and are taking them out. So that's good. Here's a photo, that you can see right here of what it looks like. It's just it looks like a witch's broom. Is how we would describe it. Just really deformed, weird new growth. And what I see on these roses is they get one or two pieces of this witch's broom, or one or two on the plant, and then the next year almost the whole plant's covered in it, and the third year they're just dead. Is what I've seen in my neighborhood here and other places in the southeast where I've seen it. Somebody asked a question about overwatering. Basically, they had two vines. They went to a garden center to have it diagnosed what was going on with it, and the person figured that they were overwatering them. And then they said they've come home and they haven't watered them as much, and they're continuing to decline. That's likely because you have root rot. I mean, keep in mind, it's easier to recover from underwatering than overwatering, because when you overwater, you actually damage the roots on the plant. And so in order for that plant to recover from that, it's got to grow new roots, and sometimes they can and sometimes they can't. Sometimes they'll continue to decline because they've actually gotten a disease from it, or sometimes what you're seeing in the top of the plant is just a nutrient deficiency because the roots just can't operate properly when they're overwatered. Some plants can obviously take more water on their roots than others, so this varies from plant to plant, but you may see them continue to decline until the point they die, or they may reach a point where they stabilize. Sometimes it's a good idea to take a little bit of the top of the plant off to kind of reduce the amount that those roots are responsible for. So that may be a good idea. It was actually some Carolina jessamine. I'd probably take them down. They were in containers where I think they had been overwatering them. But that's, again, if you underwater something, if I underwater this tray, with these hibiscus seedlings in it, and they wilt a bit. When I water it, it soaks up the water, it soaks it up and recovers as long as I don't go too long. But if I start to rot them, they have to grow all new roots. So that process just takes longer. Lots of questions about the frost damage that people took. Some people took less than they thought they would, and some people, much more than they thought they would. So that's kind of all over the place. Make sure, if you had bulbs like hyacinths or daffodils, that kind of thing, if you're taking the flowers off where they were damaged, make sure you're leaving the plant itself in place, all the green foliage in place, because the plant will still, that daffodil bulb or that hyacinth bulb or crocus, whatever it is, will still continue to put on a little bit more green growth, and that's its process for rebuilding the nutrients in that bulb for next year. So make sure think that through as you're deadheading your bulbs. Leave the foliage in place until it dies back on its own. People want to know how far they should prune something back that got damaged. I will generally let the plant tell me that. So given 2 or 3 weeks out from now, most of the plants will have had time to reset. All of my butterfly bushes were badly damaged because they had all started to really grow way too much. When they start to flush back out, I'll be able to tell how far they actually died back, if they did or didn't. Butterfly bush is probably not a great example of this because they're so overall cold hardy. But let the plant tell you where it's going to leaf back out from, and then you can give it a light trimming at that point. It may be just completely unnecessary because the new growth will cover up some of that damaged growth so quickly anyway. But let the plants just leave them alone and let them come back. Let new growth come back on its own. And if you need to at that point, clean them up a bit, do it then. Okay, let's see. So somebody bought a house and it's got really old azaleas that are woody. They were likely in too much shade. Some of the trees have been cut down since they bought the new property, or cleaned up, or thinned out, or whatever. And they want to know if they can hard prune these azaleas. You can absolutely hard prune these azaleas. Old azaleas can definitely be cut to the ground and they'll come back, and you can do that after they spring flower. Few things to keep in mind. Most of these ornamental plants, have kind of a useful life expectancy in the landscape. And I'm not talking about trees here, but I'm talking about little low doming shrubs that you have, including up to azaleas and things that are 4 and 5 and 6 feet tall. They tend to have a useful lifespan. It's probably out to about 20 years before they become woody and weird and and not as great. And there's new cultivars that have been released, maybe better pieces that are available out there. So when you buy a new place, you don't feel completely obligated to go in and cut those old azaleas to the ground and wait 2 years for them to recover. If you don't like them, or you think it's something that 3 or 4 years from now, if you can't get them to recover well, that you're going to tear out anyway, I'd probably just go ahead and do it. Just throwing that out there. You're not 100% obligated to live with the things that you inherit from the previous owner of the property. And when I'm putting something in the landscape, I'm thinking it through as like a 20-year thing, 15 to 20-year thing. And again, trees, I'm thinking you're planting those for your grandkids, for your kids and your grandkids. But the shrubs and stuff, I'm thinking if you're in a house for 30 or 40 years, you're probably going to landscape that house 2 times, over the course of that time, because things just get woody and thin, and they're not as good as they were in the first decade that they were in the ground. So if you're going to cut them hard, you can do that after they flower later in the spring, and you can go right down to the ground with an old established azalea. Maybe being in more sun, they'll come out and look good. They will do a little bit more suckering, and you can go down in the bottom of it and clean up some of the little vertical suckers that are going to come up further out from the main plant. Okay, they're tree forming a limelight hydrangea, and I've got a Hydrangea Paniculata that I started tree forming last year. You guys will see plenty of that thing this spring. They didn't have a great choice for the leader, and so they picked one, but it's still a little bit crooked, and wanted to know if they can slam the thing way deep in the ground and just keep the straight part sticking up out of the ground. I wouldn't do that. It is possible that you'll get new roots from those hydrangeas root pretty readily, and you would get new roots. The problem is the roots down at the bottom that you're going to bury too deep with no air and no light, and they're controlling part of the top of that plant right now, and as they die, the plant could go through a real big downfall in the process of trying to rooting out from the trunk. Again, you won't necessarily kill it, but it's not the best way to go about this. I think I would plant it normal and then stake it, which is what I did with this one back here. Mine had a little bit of a crook in it as well. So in the process of planting it, put a good sized piece of bamboo or a metal pole or something in there next to it and tie it up tight to it. And then use that stretchy green tie to tie it up to it, and then take it off a couple times during the season and re-put it in a different spot so it doesn't dig into the plant. But I think staking it will be a better thing than burying it way deep in the ground. There are plants that you can bury deep, and definitely things like tomatoes and peppers and a lot of your annual plants that you can bury deep and get away with that. Shrubs aren't always one of those things. Okay, somebody asked me, I get questions all the time about planting around utility boxes, and eventually I'll find some place to do a video on this. But when I'm doing consultations with folks, I'm always trying to get them to think much bigger than planting around that utility box. Let's make the bed that you're putting there to hide the utility box much bigger. Make it flow up toward the house or up a driveway, and then put something ornamental well away from the utility boxes that draws people's eyes. So, like I've said many times, planting around a utility box just draws attention to the utility box. Same thing with mailboxes and things like that. If we can make those beds bigger and stretch them out, we can put something the best piece that you're purchasing, whether it be maybe this treeform limelight hydrangea, maybe it's an interesting Japanese maple, maybe it's whatever it is. The main focal point be away from that utility box, and then put your smaller things around your utility box. But just throwing that out there, that's what I like to do when I do landscape design, is let's draw their eyes away from it and not to it. Somebody asked about plants for the desert Southwest, and what varieties would be good for those higher lime soils, where to go about it. Looking that up, as you guys obviously know, I know all the folks down at the Southern Living Plant Collection and Encore Azaleas. That same company actually owns the Sunset Plant Collection as well, which used to be the Sunset Western Plant Collection. But look at those plants. Go to the Sunset website and look at the things on there. A lot of them are overlapping pieces from the Southern Living Plant Collection that do well in the desert Southwest, and then there's additional pieces as well for that area. And I have plans this year. I talked to one of the nurserymen in Baltimore whose nursery grows a lot of the pieces for the Sunset Plant Collection, and we talked about me getting out there this year. So I'm hoping to get to California this year and show off a lot of those pieces. That's my plan. My plan this year was to expand out into colder and hotter areas in the second half of the year, and the first half of the year actually get this projects done that I've been promising for a long time. Hoping that works out. But that's my plan in the second half of the year, is to travel to places and cover things that I haven't covered on the channel, just because I'm right here in Raleigh or working in the Southeast. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked about covering exposed roots of their trees, to help control erosion. So if you have surface roots on your trees, which of course red maples are notorious for, some trees just do it regardless, of what you have going on, and then others, it's caused by soil erosion. So water washing through the front yard is actually pulling soil off of the roots, and so either way, it's unappealing. It's easy to trip over and that kind of thing. You can put a small amount of hardwood mulch over those roots without hurting them. I don't bury them in 6 or 8 inches of anything, but if you want to put a couple inches of pine straw down, if you have pine straw available in your area, or triple shredded hardwood, any other bark mulches like pine bark, mini nuggets, or wood chips may be floaty if it is an area that's getting some erosion problems. So keep that in mind. Those are two things, although they would work great, tend to be a little more likely to float. If it's on any kind of slope or anything like that. So, but triple shredded hardwood mulch and pine straw tend to lock together a little bit better, and you can put a couple inches over those roots. You're not going to hurt them. Don't start burying it up the flare of the tree. Be careful with that. Put a small amount each time. Somebody has a large Camellia japonica in a container between their house and another house. I think I remember, that was it. And they wanted to know if they could hard prune the Camellia japonica because it's gotten big. You can hard prune camellias, Camellia sasanquas, Camellia japonicas, whatever species it is. They take a long time to recover. I had a neighbor cut some Camellia sasanquas from, 8 or 9 feet in front of his house, like 6 houses from me. And that was like 2 years ago, and they finally look kind of semi-normal at this point. So if it's gotten to the point where you have to hard prune it, it may be time for that plant to come out and go in the ground somewhere else or be given away, and then another camellia go back in there, or some other shrub, because it's just, like I say, once it's going to look like that for a long time. Other shrubs, most evergreen shrubs, you can just, like those azaleas we were talking about earlier, by July, they're going to be just absolutely covered in foliage and be 1.5 feet tall probably. And that's the case with most leafy evergreen shrubs that are established. But camellias are just super slow to recover. So if it were mine, I'd probably replace it and find another use for the camellia. Okay, so their average last frost date's April 4th. They started some Baptisia from seed. No, they got the Baptisia as bare root plants, and then planted them into 2-gallon pots, and wanted to put them out early, because they're looking at their 14-day forecast 2 weeks before April 4th, and want to put them in early. I would leave them in the containers and plant them closer to April 4th, and then still be looking at the 14-day forecast. Your issue here is that these. So when I throw out my frost date, it's literally my average last frost date. So if I say my average my frost date is April 16th, that is the historic date in the middle of all my frost. So keep that in mind. Like half of the frosts were after April 16th, or some portion of them were, and one was way out in May somewhere. So keep that in mind. What we're talking about here is your average. We're not talking about literally the last frost you've ever had. That's not what it is. It is literally your average last frost date. So wait till for your tomatoes and peppers and annuals, and all the things that I've got seeded here. I've got flat after flat after flat, which I'm, have out in the sun now, that I'm going to be planting, but I plant them close to my average last frost date, and then I'm looking at the 10 or 14-day forecast out from there, not before it. It will be you've got 2 weeks on the other side of your average last frost date that you could definitely still get a frost. And I've seen, man, we had 2 25-degree nights, like April 28th and 29th or something like that at the nursery years ago. It was ugly. What 2 25-degree nights will do in almost May, and that was a week and a half after my frost-free date, or which is really your average last frost date. Okay, and then somebody asked me about pruning seedlings. Those of you who have started seedlings way early, these are my things that I seeded 2 weeks ago. So these were my seed them out 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date things, and you can see how tall they are at this point. They're still low and compact. If you have things and you started them way early and they end up stretched like this, they just wanted to know if they could pinch them back. I think in this case it was some Verbena bonariensis, and yeah, absolutely, you can go and pinch them back to another leaf below that single growth. Make sure you're fertilizing. Once you have your seedlings up like this, I pour a fish emulsion and water mix into the side here. That's my organic fertilizer that I use on my seedlings. So make sure you're fertilizing them. Make sure they're getting plenty of sunlight. My T5 lights inside are super bright and super warm, but they don't do anything like the sun can do. I'd rather have them outside on the warm days and the above average night times. Another one of those similar questions about planting, when to plant outside. Somebody asked if they were safe doing it around Mother's Day in zone 7B, and I think it's like May 8th this year. Yeah, if you're up for waiting for Mother's Day every year, that's a good day to wait for. You won't have any problems if you're waiting till Mother's Day, and that's almost everybody watching, except for maybe zone 4 or 5. If you were that patient, there's just not many of us that start a lot of things that are that patient. So most of us are trying to back up more toward, our average last frost date. Somebody asked me about my opinions about using gypsum. I realize there's 150 videos, probably. Who knows how many videos about using gypsum to cure your clay soil problems. Be super careful with that. Gypsum, and I think I've answered this in the past, but gypsum really should only be used in extreme conditions to correct soils that have become very salty over time. So you think about on a large farm where they've used inorganic fertilizers for a long time, and they've added all kinds of nutrients. Maybe they're closer to a coastal area, and they've built up salts in their soil. Gypsum is a good strategy for them to leach things from their soil. So keep that in mind. Gypsum does exactly what people are telling you it does in clay soils. It breaks them up. It breaks them up and allows. It does loosen them up, but the problem is it actually allows nutrients to leach from that soil. The one thing I love about this red clay, as nasty as it is and as hard as it is for me to dig in, it is nutrient dense. Okay, it's got that red color that's in it is iron, and the plants absolutely love it. So think about improving your clay soils with compost and wood chips on top of it, and things breaking down and getting earthworms moving that stuff up and down through your soil. I've got if you've been watching the videos at all, this soil right here has come, I mean, just come so far, so fast in just 2 years. You can make a huge difference in your clay soils just using organic, just using things like wood chips and compost from the top down and hardwood mulch and, or organic materials, keeping the soil covered, allowing the worms and all the good all the beneficials in the soil to actually improve your soil. And I would not use gypsum on my soil. It will create a situation where you're leaching nutrients, and that's the real use for it, is in commercial farming. And those guys are super careful about it. I mean, they're going to lose their phosphorus potentially. They're going to lose they're going to lose nutrients in the process of trying to leach that salt from their fields and improve their fields. So again, it's not for a homeowner to be doing. It shouldn't, and you got people recommending it at garden centers who literally have zero training in soil science whatsoever, other than they were told push the gypsum when people ask about their clay soils. That's my opinion on gypsum. Somebody asked me about designing a new garden space and how I go about it. The number one thing, and I'm actually in the process of writing a book, which if somebody told me 2 years ago I was going to write a book, I would have told them they were crazy, maybe 3 years ago. But I am in the process of writing a book, and it has a lot to do with how to design your garden. And the number one step is to kind of know who you are and what you want out of it. I mean, if you're a person who doesn't really like gardening all that much and really wants a lot of free time to do other things, then you're probably going to do really basic things that are low maintenance. If you want to entertain, if you're an extrovert and you want lots of people to come over and admire what you've done, you want to design for that. If you're a person who gets home and they want to have a cup of coffee outside and not hear the people around them and just have an escape, you're designing for that. So I think through all of that, and it's something, that's the thing I'm actually in the process of writing, and that's actually the beginning of the book, is about designing a garden. I think the main question you have to ask yourself first, is that. I mean, for me, the garden is all about having people stop by and ooh and ah 12 months out of the year, and have, I'm looking behind this camera the whole time I'm talking, and there's a red bud back here that's in full bloom, and there must be 150 bees on it on a 70-degree afternoon here in Raleigh, and it's awesome. But that's my thing. You know what I mean? So know who you are, and then from that, you can start to build out, what it is that you want in your garden. Do you want lots of unique individual things, or do you want to put 40 things in the ground and go done? Hire somebody to mulch it once a year and get rid of the weeds, and that be it. So that's a lot of what goes into it. And then somebody has a big stand of Chinese privet or Ligustrum sinensis in their back garden, and it's a good screen for them. Currently, they want to get rid of it because it is an invasive weed, and want to know what to put in its place. I couldn't answer this question because they didn't put the zone they lived in, or anything to help me. Native plants work well under those understory things. So for me, in this back row back here, I would use, lots of Alyssium. Camellias aren't native, but the camellias will work. There's a lot of kind of drought tolerant, part shade loving plants that you could put in the border of a woodland area like that. The reason I actually picked this question is because I'm doing a video this week on getting rid of identifying and eliminating some of the invasive plants, because this is a good time of year to do it while the soil's still moist. So that video will be going up this week. The winners for the ProPlugger on YouTube, it's Pam McKinley, and on Instagram it's Chad Cox or ccox73. If you send me an email over to horttube@gmail.com, I will, just include your address in the email. I'll get ProPlugger will send out the the ProPlugger to each of you. So thanks everyone for participating in that. I'm going to do a local giveaway in the next few weeks for one of the 2 that I have, and I'll announce that when that's going to happen. So again, thanks for participating in these question and answer videos. Ask a question down below and I will pick from them next week. Thanks again.